Bienvenue à tous. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Karima Kara and I will be your moderator for today's public information session. Je m'appelle Karima Kara. Je serai l'animatrice de cette séance d'information publique. Staff from the City of Ottawa's Transportation Services Department will deliver a presentation on Stage 2 LRT project. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly go over how this event will work. J'aimerais vous expliquer en quelques mots le déroulement de cette séance. This is an online interactive session. In addition to the audience in this room, we're broadcasting on Facebook Live and on the city's YouTube channel. Il s'agit d'une séance interactive en ligne. Nous allons nous adresser au public ici présent et la séance sera également transmise sur Facebook Live et sur la chaîne YouTube de la Ville d'Ottawa. We also have an audience gathered to watch the live broadcast at the Hunt Club Riverside Park Community Center, hosted by South End City Councillors. D'autres personnes sont réunies au centre communautaire Hunt Club Riverside Park pour suivre la séance en direct à une rencontre organisée par les conseillers municipaux du secteur sud. Diane Deans, Gloucester Southgate Ward, Jean Cloutier, Alta Vista Ward, Riley Brockington, River Ward, George Darouz, Osgood Ward, Michael Kakish, Gloucester South Nepean Ward. Tonight's presentation will take place in English and in French. La présentation de ce soir se déroulera en anglais et en français. Following the presentation, audience members, online and in person, will be invited to participate in a question and answer period and have their questions answered in real time. Une fois la présentation terminée, tous les spectateurs, qu'ils aient suivi la séance en ligne ou en personne, pourront participer à une période de questions et réponses durant laquelle on répondra à leurs questions en temps réel. At the end of the presentation, you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions in French or in English, et il nous fera plaisir de répondre à vos questions en anglais ou en français. The question and answer panel will be Chris Swale, Director of O-Train Planning, and André Brisebois, Transportation Services. And we're also joined by Councillors Egley, McKenna, and Taylor, and John Manconi, General Manager, Transportation Services. Les deux panélistes qui répondront aux questions du public s'appellent Directeur Planification de l'O-Train et André Brisebois de la Direction générale des transports. Les personnes qui suivent la séance sur Facebook Live peuvent écrire leurs questions directement dans la partie commentaires, juste en dessous de la vidéo qu'elles sont en train de regarder. Facebook Live viewers can type their questions directly in the comment sections located just below the video you're watching right now. The audience at the Hunt Club Riverside Park Community Center will submit their questions to their own facilitator who will send them here. And the audience here at City Hall can ask directly by using the microphone. If you prefer, you can also write down your questions on the cards that are provided at the front of the table, which staff members will collect. Et enfin, les membres du public qui se trouvent ici à l'Hôtel de Ville pourront utiliser le microphone pour poser leurs questions ou, s'ils préfèrent, l'écrire sur des cartes mises à leur disposition sur la table à l'avant de la salle et que les membres du personnel passeront ramasser. I'll help facilitate your questions to our Q&A panel. N'oubliez pas que cette session a une durée limitée, mais nous essaierons de répondre au plus grand nombre de questions possibles. And now, I am pleased to invite the Director of OC Training, OC Train Planning, Mr. Chris Swale, and Monsieur André Brisebois, Transportation Services. J'aimerais maintenant inviter Monsieur Chris Swale, Directeur Planification de l'O-Train, et Monsieur André Brisebois, de la Direction générale des transports, à venir prendre la parole. Merci.
Thank you very much, Karima. And thank everyone very much for joining us here today, either here in person or in the south end of town at the Hunt Club Riverside Park Community Center or virtually via Facebook Live. My name is Chris Swale, and I'm the director of the Stage 2 Light Rail Transit Project. And we're here today because in just 1 week's time, Ottawa City Council will be voting on a plan for the largest single investment our city has seen in its history.
Alors, bonsoir à tous. Je m'appelle André.
My name is André Bisbois. I'm the Francophone spokesperson for the transportation branch. Thank you for joining us today, whether you're here in person in the south end of the city at the Hunt Club Riverside Community Center or virtually through Facebook. We're here today because in 1 week, City Council will be voting for the most important investment of the city's history.
Significantly expand our city's O-Train LRT system. It builds on the success of Confederation Line with the strongest business case out of any project across the country, with an expansion that will see 70% of all residents living within 5 kilometers of a light rail system. Significant consultations have taken place on this project over the past 2 years, and this report is the result of a great deal of thought, time, and work on the part of a very broad Stage 2 team, as well as inputs from residents and stakeholders that have flowed from these consultations. So what is Stage 2? As mentioned, Stage 2 is the proposed second phase of the city's light rail system. Stage 2 builds on the Confederation Line. I'm just going to change the slide here. It's shown in the thick red line in the middle, which is currently under construction between Tunney's Pasture and Blair Road, as well as the existing Trillium line shown in the thick green line running from Bayview to Greenboro. Trillium is currently operating today with Confederation Line scheduled to open in 2018, at which point construction on Stage 2 would begin. When Confederation Line opens, the O-Train system will also include the existing north-south Trillium line, which will also include the Trillium line, will be the busiest light rail system in North America, going 12.5 kilometers from Tunney's Pasture in the west to Blair Station in the east, including a 2.5 kilometer tunnel through our downtown core. When open, Confederation Line will be the busiest LRT system in North America, with the city of Boston being its nearest rival. The goal of Stage 2 is to build on this. It aims to further extend the reach of LRT, reduce congestion and transit wait times, while ensuring a convenient, reliable mode of transportation that is fully accessible while being easy to access for most residents. If the implementation of the Stage 2 project is approved, as outlined in the report, it would expand the O-Train system to Trim Road in the east, Moody Drive in the west, and to the airport in Beauceville in the south. This expanded system would link our innovation and academic hubs in the city, the Innovation Centre, Carleton University, the University of Ottawa, La Cité, and Algonquin College. Stage 2 will also link Ottawa's retail centres, including Bayshore, the Rideau Centre, Saint Laurent, Gloucester Centre, and Place d'Orléans. Major employment nodes, the Bayview Parks, City Parks, Parliament Hill, the Rideau Canal, and numerous arts and cultural centers within this rapid, reliable LRT service. Simply put, Stage 2 will significantly change how residents move across our city, as transit would become a first-choice transportation option for more and more trips of all kinds, not just daily commutes.
Alors, qu'est-ce que l'étape 2? Comme mentionné précédemment, l'étape 2 est la deuxième phase du projet de réseau de train léger sur rail de la Ville d'Ottawa, connu sous le nom de l'O-Train. L'étape 2 s'appuie sur la ligne de la Confédération, indiquée par une ligne rouge épaisse derrière moi, qui est actuellement en construction entre la station Tunney's Pasture et la station Blair, ainsi que la ligne Trillium actuelle, indiquée par une ligne verte épaisse allant de la station Bayview à la station Greenboro. La ligne Trillium est opérationnelle et la mise en service de la ligne de la Confédération est prévue pour 2018, date à laquelle la construction de l'étape 2 commencera. Lorsqu'elle sera en service, la ligne de la Confédération, qui couvrira 12,5 km de la station Tunney's Pasture à l'ouest jusqu'à la station Blair à l'est, y compris un tunnel de 2,5 km qui passe au travers le centre-ville, sera le réseau de trains légers sur rail le plus achalandé en Amérique du Nord, la ville de Boston étant son plus proche rival. L'objectif de l'étape 2 consiste à tirer parti de ce point fort. Elle vise à étendre la portée du train léger sur rail, à réduire la congestion et le temps d'attente dans le transport en commun, tout en offrant un moyen de transport pratique, fiable et entièrement accessible pour les résidents. Si l'étape 2 du projet est approuvée comme décrite dans le rapport de mise en œuvre de l'étape 2, elle prolongera le réseau de l'eau-train jusqu'au chemin de Trim à l'est, la promenade Moury à l'ouest, ainsi que l'aéroport et Beauceville au sud. Ce réseau prolongé permettrait de relier les carrefours de l'innovation et le centre académique de la ville, dont le Centre d'innovation, l'Université Carleton, l'Université d'Ottawa, la Cité collégiale et le Collège Algonquin. L'étape 2 permettra aussi de relier les établissements d'enseignants postsecondaires d'Ottawa, le centre de vente au détail, y compris le centre Bayshore, le centre Rideau, Place d'Orléans, Saint-Laurent et le centre Gloucester, ainsi que les principaux centres d'emploi, le centre de l'innovation dans les cours Bayview, les parcs municipaux, la colline du Parlement, le canal Rideau, de même que de nombreux centres artistiques, culturels, grâce à un service de train léger sur rail rapide et fiable. Bref, cela changera la façon dont les résidents se déplaceront dans notre ville.
I mentioned the strength of Stage 2's business case. Well, the evidence of this case can be found on the quantifiable benefits that Stage 2 will deliver. It will reduce Ottawa's greenhouse gas emissions by at least 100,000 tons and air contaminants by more than 3,000 tons annually by 2048. Providing efficient, reliable, more comfortable LRT will move more people to transit, removing 14,000 cars off the road, and will see residents save $7.1 billion in cumulative commuting costs. The project itself has many economic benefits as well, generating over 21,000 person-years of employment and approximately $4.5 billion in economic output.
On a mentionné la solide analyse de cas de l'étape 2 et les avantages quantifiables générés par l'étape 2 en font la preuve. L'étape 2 permettra de réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre d'Ottawa d'au moins 110 000 tonnes et les principaux polluants atmosphériques de plus de 3 000 tonnes annuellement d'ici 2048. La prestation de services de TLR efficace, fiable et plus confortable incitera davantage de gens à prendre le transport en commun, entraînant le retrait de 14 000 voitures des routes et permettant aux résidents d'économiser 7,1 milliards de dollars en frais de transport quotidiens. Le projet lui-même comporte aussi de nombreux avantages économiques qui rendent plus de 21 000 années personnes d'emploi et 4,5 milliards de dollars en retombées économiques.
As you may have read, the report is broken down into 3 parts. Part 1 describes the alignment improvements that Council is being asked to endorse, changes that were subject to public consultation and were included as part of the Confederation Line West EA process. It also recommends the addition of Trim, Airport, Moody, and other bundled projects to be added to the Stage 2 project, and this is subject to funding. The section essentially paints the entirety of what we plan to build and how we're trying to achieve as much value and scope for the city as we possibly can. Part 1 also distinguishes between those project elements that will be cost-shared by the city and those project elements that, while still being delivered by the city, will be funded by other levels of government. Part 2 lays out the proposed approach that staff is recommending to hold a vigorous competition and the role RTG will play in setting the stage for good market participation. Part 3 of the report covers some of the specific activities the city will continue to undertake and be ready to implement Stage 2, including an approach to maintain mobility and bus service throughout construction, as well as approaches to assembling and getting access to the required lands.
Alors, comme vous l'avez peut-être lu, le rapport se divise en 3 sections. La première section décrit les améliorations apportées au tracé que l'on demande au Conseil d'approuver. Ces modifications ont fait l'objet de consultations publiques et ont été incluses dans le processus d'évaluation environnementale de la ligne de la Confédération Ouest. Elle recommande également que les prolongements jusqu'à Trim, l'aéroport et Moury, ainsi que d'autres projets regroupés, soient ajoutés à l'étape 2 du projet sous réserve du financement. Cette section décrit essentiellement la totalité de ce que nous avons l'intention de construire et les mesures prises pour obtenir le meilleur rapport qualité-prix et la plus vaste portée possible pour la Ville. La première section fait également la distinction entre les éléments du projet dont les coûts seront partagés par la Ville et les éléments qui, tout étant mis en œuvre par la Ville, seront financés par d'autres paliers de gouvernement. La deuxième section présente l'approche recommandée par le personnel pour organiser un appel d'offres concurrentiel ainsi que le rôle que jouera RTG afin de préparer le terrain et encourager la participation des promoteurs. Enfin, la troisième section du rapport porte sur certaines des activités que la Ville entreprendra afin d'être prêt à mettre en œuvre l'étape 2, y compris les démarches pour maintenir la mobilité et un service d'autobus pendant toute la durée des travaux, ainsi que les démarches visant à regrouper les terres nécessaires et à avoir accès à ces terres.
So let's begin with part one, expanding Stage 2 LRT project.
Commençons donc par la première section, le prolongement prévu par l'étape 2 du projet TLR.
Further to the alignment improvements presented to Committee and Council in May of last year, the improvements listed here are being recommended for the Confederation Line West extension and Trillium Line extension. For Confederation Line West, this includes improvements to the alignment at Richmond Road, Lincoln Fields, Iris Station, and Bayshore. For Trillium Line, this includes relocating and building a new maintenance and storage facility and improvements to the airport station. I'll go into further detail on each improvement in the following slides. The Confederation Line West changes have been brought forward following extensive public consultation and were incorporated into the recently approved environmental assessment, subject to Council endorsement. Some of the additional EA approvals will be required as a result of additional changes that this report also recommends. Some of you will recall, in May of last year, we recommended an adjustment at Cleary Station that shifted the alignment through the property at 747 Richmond so that the station entrance could front onto Richmond Road. The change included addressing some of the additional challenge. This change includes addressing some of the additional challenges with this route. Staff has recommended a shift of the alignment to the south, the red line on the screen, beginning west of Cleary Station, crossing over the West Nepean Collector at Cleary Avenue to transition under the Byron Linear Park a few hundred meters farther east than what was previously planned. This shift in where the train will run will save approximately 15 to 20 million in construction costs, reduce construction durations by approximately 5 to 6 months, and minimize property and utility impacts. It also creates an opportunity to enhance the Byron Linear Park upon completion of LRT, as illustrated in this next slide. The capital cost savings associated with this improved Richmond alignment also allows the city the opportunity to restore and enhance the park between Cleary Avenue to the west of New Orchard Station. The city is working closely with the community in developing an enhanced park concept, which will make the park more contiguous and will also help reduce cut-through traffic and increase the park's size. We've also worked with the community on the Richmond Road Complete Street initiative within this corridor. These integrated projects will create a more calm and safe, yet still vibrant corridor for residents and visitors who frequent the park, as well as those who travel through it on all modes. This slide illustrates the recommended shift at Lincoln Fields, which will see the alignment move from within the floodplain, illustrated in the blue, to the alignment illustrated in red. Not only does this shift eliminate the flood risk to LRT operations, it also lightens our overall infrastructure footprint and allows us to keep this section of the transitway open throughout Stage 2 construction. This shift can be implemented at a comparable cost and would include a new Lincoln Field station, a new LRT tunnel under Carling Avenue, and a new fare-paid bus terminal reoriented to provide improved station integration with the overall transit network. Staying here for a moment, the recommended revised station also provides operational flexibility to turn trains around at Lincoln Fields, as well as the opportunity to insert empty trains in the morning rush hour to enhance capacity into the downtown core. The ability to add a train, coupled with Stage 2's implementation of an additional strip of track at Herdman Station, will allow the city to run what are called day trippers, trains that can start empty and run to and from Lincoln Fields and Herdman. This will help provide more capacity throughout the downtown at peak periods or after major downtown events such as Canada Day or Blues Fest. The design concept at Iris Station includes a new station integrated with a new bridge at Iris Street to provide grade separation between LRT and the road itself. However, the location at the Iris Street station configuration conflicted with the existing Pinecrest Creek culvert, and that's shown in yellow on the slide. To address this conflict, staff are recommending relocating the Pinecrest Creek to cross under the LRT alignment further to the south of Iris Street. Pinecrest Creek would then pass under Iris along the west side of the LRT alignment and continue along the west side where it rejoins the existing creek, as shown at the top of the slide. Further west at Bayshore, staff recommend shifting the station 75 meters to the east. This will allow for improved access to the station, as well as a direct future connection for passengers to access the shopping center. The costs associated with shifting Bayshore Station slightly to the east are negligible. If this connection is pursued, the property owners of Bayshore Shopping Centre will be responsible for constructing and funding, and discussions between the city and the property owners are ongoing. Moving over to Trillium Line, the initial functional design maintained Trillium Line's Walkley Yard maintenance and storage facility at its current location. However, after further assessment, it was determined that the construction of a new maintenance and storage facility on city land, just west of Albion Road, literally just on the other side of the street, as shown in the graphic to the left, is preferred at a comparable cost to renovating and expanding the current Trillium Walkley Yard MSF, as it's to the city advantage to have a potential proponent build on land we already hold without impacting adjacent residents or businesses. The airport station has also been reviewed in consultation with the Airport Authority to explore opportunities to improve the location by shifting it to the terminal itself. The improved station location is shown in the large red oval on the graphic. The previous location was within the parking lot, the parking structure, which you can see in blue and the small oval at the bottom of the page. The new station would connect the terminal via an elevated pedestrian link and hold some opportunity for the airport to implement a modest expansion. Conditional to federal and provincial funding, this report recommends a procurement that will also build the airport link, the trim extension, as well as the Moody extension with a potential new maintenance and storage facility west of Bayshore, which will be required as the system expands. Trim in the airport would require 100% funding from the federal and provincial governments, and Moody, we believe, is achievable within the $3 billion core Stage 2 program. Ultimately, when we go out to tender, the market will decide what can be built and at what price, but our work on the preliminary engineering designs for these extensions are ongoing to the city to ensure that the city has the option to proceed. The next slides give you a little more detail on the scope of each of these extensions.
Sous réserve de l'obtention d'un financement fédéral et provincial, ce rapport recommande la création d'un processus d'approvisionnement qui comprendra un lien ferroviaire vers l'aéroport, le prolongement jusqu'à Trim et la promenade Moury, en plus d'une nouvelle installation d'entretien et de remisage potentielle à l'ouest de Bayshore qui sera nécessaire à mesure que le réseau prend de l'ampleur. Le prolongement jusqu'à Trim et le lien ferroviaire vers l'aéroport nécessiterait un financement à 100% des gouvernements fédéral et provincial. Nous croyons que le prolongement jusqu'à Moury est réalisable dans le cadre du budget de base de 3 milliards de dollars de l'étape 2. Finalement, lorsque nous irons en appel d'offres, c'est le marché qui décidera ce qui peut être construit et à quel prix, mais nos travaux sur la conception technique préliminaire pour ces prolongements continuent afin de s'assurer que la Ville a le choix d'aller de l'avant. Les prochaines diapositives donnent un peu plus de détails sur la portée de chacun de ces prolongements.
Extending to Trim would involve going 3.5 kilometers farther east from Place d'Orleans to Trim Station. It includes a new Trim Station, a new interchange at Trim Road to grade separate, and its design protects for 3 additional future stations as development increases along the corridor. The airport link will add a 4-kilometer branch line connecting at South Quay Station that will be fully independent of the main line to improve reliability. It includes 2 new stations, one at the Ernst & Young Centre at Uplands Drive and another at the airport terminal. While we are installing infrastructure to protect for direct to Bayview service, we anticipate that it will operate such that it will require 2 transfers, one at South Quays and the other at Bayview to get from the airport to downtown. The Moody extension aligns with the city's ultimate transportation master plan, which envisions an LRT extension west of Bayshore to Canada. And it also follows Council's direction to explore advancing grade separation at Holly Acres. As ridership grows, a western MSF to accommodate additional vehicles will be required sometime between 2031 and 2035. Sooner if the city chooses not to store vehicles for light maintenance at Baseline Station. It is anticipated that with cost compression and by challenging bidders to meet the expanded scope within an affordability cap, both the extension and MSF can be accommodated within existing budgets. Should the extension and additional MSF not be possible within the affordability cap, these items will be subject to de-scoping to maintain the project budget. The benefits of going to Moody include improved customer service, increased ridership, and significantly reduced capital and long-term maintenance costs associated with the new maintenance and storage facility at Moody, as compared to the previously planned site at Woodruff. A location at Moody or farther west is operationally and financially preferred to the current EA plan, and the report recommends, as a result, that the city abandon its plans for that Woodruff MSF. In total, these 3 extensions would add nearly 10 kilometers of rail and 4 additional stations, which, when combined with the core Stage 2 program, would essentially triple the total length of the O-Train system 5 years after Confederation Line opens in 2018. If approved, we will need to take immediate action with respect to EA approval and design to ensure timely coordination with the Stage 2 procurement process timelines. The report speaks to bundling the province's planned and budgeted Highway 417 expansion project from Maitland to the 416, selected city infrastructure works, and subject to funding, a section of Highway 147 between Montreal Road and Jeanne d'Arc Boulevard. Bundling these projects would allow the city to address coordination and schedule risk, to benefit from cost compression, building on lessons learned from the successful bundling of the 417 widening highway project that was done with Confederation Line. In terms of the overall scope of Stage 2, I thought it would be valuable to start sharing some details to help illustrate this. This table shows the numbers of people the system will move in the AM peak hour. Nearly 39,000 riders will get on LRT in the peak hour in 2023, which is estimated to increase by 13.2% by 2031. Trillium Line is also expected to see an increase, in this case, of over 14%. These will be Ottawa's 10 busiest stations on the O-Train system after Stage 2 is fully operational. Lyon, Herdman, the station at Ottawa U, Parliament, Baseline, Rideau, Moody, Blair, Tunney's, Pasteur, and Place d'Orleans. Park and ride capacity is also of interest for many of our residents, and the city is constantly struggling to keep up with demand. Stage 2 will see significant increases to capacity at Trim, adding over 1,100 spots, as well as adding nearly 1,000 spots between Leitrim and Beauceville by 2023, with the capacity for significant expansions, with Leitrim capping out at 925 spots, and Beauceville with the potential for 31 additional spaces. Now, on to how we plan to procure Stage 2. With any procurement, the city's goal is to get as much competition as possible. On this front, the city was faced with a number of unique procurement challenges as well as objectives. First, we wanted to maintain the advantages of the risk transfer and accountability for performance that we achieved through the Confederation Line procurement. And second, we wanted to ensure a well-participated, fair, and competitive procurement process that would produce excellent pricing and value for the city. The project team determined that the best course of action was to enter into discussions with RTG to negotiate a limited extension to the Confederation Line scope and project agreement to determine if it would be possible to extract available efficiencies that would be favorable to the city. As a result, we have come to a fixed price agreement, or MOU, with RTG, which staff believes represents excellent value to the city, and which I'll take you through the details on the next slide.
Voyons maintenant comment nous avons l'intention d'effectuer l'approvisionnement de l'étape 2.
This is how we hope to proceed for Stage 2. The purpose of the city is to generate as much competition as possible. On this plan, the city had various challenges and has some very specific objectives. In consequence, we concluded a memorandum of agreement with RTG, which would be excellent value for the city. And I'll give you more details on the next slide.
Ensuring good system integration. They will expand the Belfast MSF to continue to build Stage 2 vehicles after the full Confederation Line fleet is finished. They would also provide communications equipment to make sure the system functions as a single, seamlessly integrated whole. They will also support the city in approving designs where it could impact service delivery or the quality of the build. And they will still hold that single point of accountability and the same risk profile for the expanded line as they hold today for Confederation Line. The total capital cost agreed with RTG in the MOU is $492 million. $492 million. The majority of this representing the purchase and delivery of 38 additional light rail vehicles and the expansion of the Belfast MSF. The additional vehicles would be maintained by RTG with rates that are extensions of the bid prices in the original Confederation Line competition, with reductions corresponding to the efficiencies of scale and operation. RTG has also agreed as part of this MOU to bow out of the Confederation Line expansion bid, which will ensure a much more robust competition for the remaining work for the Confederation Line East and West extensions, which will be procured as a $2.5 billion design, build, and short-term finance competitive tender. We can also be assured to get good competition on the DBFM, the design, build, finance, and maintain for Trillium Line, which will also be procured as a competitive tender. This was confirmed earlier this year in a second round of market soundings with industry, with approximately a dozen major construction consortiums participating.
Si l'entente est approuvée, RTG fournirait le parc de véhicules pour l'étape 2.
If it is approved, RTG will give the phase 2 cars and would ensure maintenance at Belfast Court to pursue the construction of phase 2 once the Confederation Line is finished. It will also provide communication equipment to make sure that the network is working as a whole. RTG will also support the city by approving design where it could impact service delivery or the quality of the build, and they will still hold a single point of accountability and the same risk profile for the expanded line as they hold today for the Confederation Line. The total capital cost agreed by the RTG in the MOU is $492 million. The majority of this being the purchase and delivery of 38 additional light rail vehicles and the expansion of the Belfast station. The maintenance will be ensured by RTG with rates that are extensions of the bid prices in the original Confederation Line competition, with reductions corresponding to the efficiencies of scale and operation. RTG also agreed as part of this MOU to bow out of the Confederation Line expansion bid, which will ensure a much more robust competition for the remaining work of the Confederation Line East and West extensions, which will be procured at a $2.5 billion design built short-term finance DBF competitive tender. We can also be assured to get good competition for the Trillium Line, which will be procured at a design build finance maintenance competitive tender. DBFM. This was confirmed at the beginning of the year in the second round of market soundings with approximately a dozen major consortiums. So what about the pricing?
The fixed price MOU, as I mentioned before, secures excellent pricing for the city. In 2012, the city paid approximately $10 million per vehicle, and with this fixed price agreement, we would pay approximately $8.9 million per vehicle. For vehicle maintenance, which is paid on a per kilometer basis, we received a reduction from $2.45 a kilometer to $2.27. So that's a 7% reduction in pricing. For infrastructure maintenance, we went from $1.4 million a year per kilometer to just over $1 million per kilometer, or a 30% reduction. All of the elements of the MOU were either demonstrated to be priced better than what was received through competitive tension back in 2012, or where there was no previous price established for comparable service was confirmed to represent good value by the city through a third-party estimator. It's important to note that the improved maintenance pricing applies to the whole system, meaning that the result of negotiations resulted in savings on the original maintenance contract as well. I just want to illustrate what that means for the city's books. If we were to simply price the maintenance for the expanded system at the competitively awarded Confederation Line pricing, the city would pay approximately $800 million more between now and 2048, or approximately $30 million more per year. If we were to only look at the savings associated with Confederation Line on that maintenance pricing, these are reduced by approximately $300 million from our current agreement over the concession period. Before going over the third and final section, which discusses the other specific activities the city will continue to undertake to be ready to implement Stage 2, I wanted to go over the budget and funding.
Alors, avant d'examiner la troisième et dernière section qui traite des
So before going over the third and final section, which discusses the other specific activities the city will continue to undertake to be ready to implement Stage 2, I want to go over the budget and funding. Voici comment se présentent les prix depuis la dernière fois qu'on s'est présenté au Conseil. Prolongement de l'étape 2, donc la ligne de la Confédération Est et Ouest, Trillium, Sud, Moody, ensemble, toujours 3 milliards, qui correspond aux estimations de 2013 avec le plan directeur des transports. C'est ce qu'on a dit quand on était devant le Conseil la dernière fois.
The airport rail link at $155 million, as well as trim extension at $160 million, remain consistent with what we've previously reported. So for LRT, altogether, the total scope remains as budgeted back both in 2013 and 2015. The additional work we're planning on bundling with our projects includes $200 million, which is the estimated cost to date for the Highway 417 widening, which is going to be solely provincially funded. And then we have approximately $100 million in bundled projects that the city is going to do. Most of this is rehab work, which will come from separate budgets in separate departments in order to coordinate good outcomes from a construction perspective.
Alors, voici la répartition des coûts actuels au Conseil. Le prolongement de l'étape 2, la ligne de la Confédération vers l'Est, donc jusqu'à Trim, et vers l'Ouest, jusqu'à Moury et Trillium vers le Sud, représente un montant de 3 milliards de dollars. 3 milliards de dollars, comme nous avions présenté au Conseil auparavant. Le lien ferroviaire vers l'aéroport représente la somme de 155 millions de dollars et celle-ci serait financée par les paliers de gouvernement fédéral et provincial. Le prolongement jusqu'à Trim représente la somme de 160 millions de dollars et ce prolongement aussi serait financé par les gouvernements fédéral et provincial. On ajoute à ça aussi l'expansion de l'autoroute 417 qui représente une somme de 200 millions de dollars qui serait financée par le gouvernement provincial. Il y a aussi un montant de 100 millions de dollars pour les projets regroupés qui seraient livrés par la Ville. Cette somme provient de différentes enveloppes budgétaires et englobe différents projets qui touchent différents départements, mais qui sont regroupés pour avoir des économies d'échelle et pour justement avoir une meilleure valeur pour la Ville.
To summarize where we are with our government partners, last June, Premier Wynne made a funding announcement that would see the province contribute up to $1 billion for the core Stage 2 program, as well as contributing 50% of the capital costs for both Trim and Airport. In addition, the federal government is already giving support to this project. Last year, the federal government launched the first phase of its Public Transit Infrastructure Fund with a contribution of over $65 million to Stage 2. Later this year, the federal government is set to launch the next phase of its entire suite of infrastructure programs, including the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund and the Green Infrastructure Program. Once this is in place, a formal federal commitment can be made to the project. In the meantime, based on staff confidence that federal support will be forthcoming in the near term, the report recommends that the city release its request for qualifications, processed soon after the report is passed, and then, only after funding and eligibility are formally confirmed, we would go out and release the RFP.
A lot of strategies and design changes that we plan to employ for the build have helped on the detour front. The alignment shift at Lincoln Fields will allow us to keep most of this existing section of the transitway open through construction. We will maintain the transit lanes along the 174 throughout construction. The 417 will also be used for detours during the construction. And the 417 will also be used for detours when the Pinecrest to Bayshore section of the transitway is shut down. We'll also delay some detours as long as possible, such as the detour between Iris and Baseline that will have to use Woodruff, as well as the detour that will occur at the west end of Scott Street once the transitway needs to be closed from Tunis to Dominion. As for the 16-month shutdown of the Trillium Line, transit priority measure along Bronson and Carling will enhance this route, while OC Transpo has confirmed its preference to continue to run buses along Preston as opposed to the Sherwood-Bayswater option mentioned in the report. This option will be reserved for when Preston is closed or should an unplanned event occur.
Changes that we plan to employ for the build have helped us on the detour front. As Andre was saying, the alignment shift at Lincoln Fields that we've discussed earlier will allow us to keep most of the existing section of the transitway open throughout construction. We'll maintain the transit lanes along the 174 throughout construction as well, and the 417 will also be used for detours when the Pinecrest to Bayshore section of the transitway is shut down to be converted to LRT. We'll also delay some detours as long as possible, such as the detour between Iris and Baseline when we will have to use Woodruff, as well as the detour that will occur at the west end of Scott Street once the transitway needs to be closed along the trench from Tunney's to Dominion. As for the 16-month shutdown of the Trillium Line, transit priority measures along Bronson and Carling will enhance this route, while OC Transpo has confirmed its preference to continue to run buses along Preston as opposed to the Sherwater-Bayswater option mentioned in the report. This option will be reserved for when Preston is closed or should an unplanned event occur. Staff are also interested in looking at ways the Stage 2 LRT project might leverage some station-oriented development opportunities. But more than this, we wanted to do our best to ensure quality designs that could accelerate development at these sites that might otherwise languish for a number of years after opening the system. Other opportunities may unfold as the project progresses, as was the case for Confederation Line, but we believe these sites at Baseline, Cleary, and Pinecrest stations can attract the kind of high-quality, mixed-use development opportunities that can be well integrated with these designs. As a result of the design standards approved by Council in December 2015, public washrooms will be provided at the following terminus stations: Bayshore, Baseline, Beauceville, and Place d'Orleans, in addition to Lincoln Fields, given the high volume of transfers at that station. Should funding commitments and project affordability accommodate the implementation of Moody and Trim extensions, then both Trim Station and Moody Station would be outfitted with public washrooms as required. These washrooms would be implemented in the place of washrooms at Bayshore Station and Place d'Orleans, as they would no longer be terminus stations. To summarize, the report provides recommendations that meets Council's direction and, if approved, would allow for a competitive procurement process for all three extensions to begin with the release of the formal request for qualifications in early March. And this helps us keep on with our overall construction schedule. Alignment changes and refinements as outlined in the report, expansion of Stage 2 to include Trim, Airport, and Moody, and an MSF, bundling the city projects and the Highway 417 widening, approve the execution of the MOU with RTG, and approve the Confederation Line extensions procured as a DBF, and for Confederation Line East and West, and Trillium as a separate DBFM.
En somme, le rapport formule des recommandations qui
The report makes recommendations that, if approved, would permit a competitive process for the three alignments, the three expansions starting in March. And that would also permit improvement to the alignment as included in the report. The extension 2 would go up to Moody and the MSF. The bundling of the municipal project and the widening of the 417, the approval of the execution of the PE, the extension of the Trillium Line under the different CCFE.
As we mentioned last week when we were in front of committee, there's lots left to do. Our next steps include presenting to Council for approval of Stage 2 next week. Approval of this report does not assign the procurement. We'll be back at the time of contract award sometime in Q2 2018 for that. What approval does do is set out a course that staff believes will deliver great results for Ottawa's transit future. Provided Council does approve the project, we would then move forward with Stage 2, including awarding the contract to project consortiums in 2018, with construction beginning later in 2018. And all 3 extensions openings will be staged beginning with Trillium Line in 2021, Confederation Line East in 2022, and Confederation Line West in 2023.
Alors, comme ce fut mentionné la semaine dernière, il reste encore beaucoup de pain sur la planche. On voit ici les prochaines étapes à procéder. On commence avec la semaine prochaine, dès mercredi, donc d'ici une semaine, l'examen par le Conseil. Si le Conseil approuve le rapport, on procède ensuite avec la demande de qualification et ensuite la demande de proposition. L'attribution du contrat sera l'an prochain, vers le printemps-été. La construction devrait commencer dès l'automne 2018. Et ensuite, la mise en service des différents segments de la ligne de la Confédération de l'Étape 2 seront mises en étapes graduellement. On commencera avec la ligne Trillium en 2021, la ligne de la Confédération Est, donc le prolongement jusqu'au chemin Trim en 2022, et ensuite la ligne de la Confédération Ouest, le prolongement jusqu'à Moody en 2023.
Once fully operational, the O-Train system comprised of Confederation Line running east and west and the expanded Trillium Line running north-south will span over 59 kilometers of rail and include 41 stations. I just want to pause on this for a minute. Currently, we have 8 kilometers of LRT on Trillium Line. From this to nearly 60 kilometers represents an incredible transformation in terms of how the city will move and grow. Over time, the system will be able to accommodate up to 24,000 people per hour in each direction, more than twice the capacity of what our transit system can handle today. When Stage 2 opens for revenue service in 2023, as I mentioned before, approximately 70% of the city's population will be within 5 kilometers of this system, a clean, quiet, comfortable, and convenient light rail transit system.
Alors, lorsque mise en service, la ligne de la Confédération
Once fully operational, the O-Train system comprised of the Confederation Line running east-west and the Trillium Line running north-south will expand over 59 kilometers. Over time, the Confederation Line could greet 14,000 people per hour in each direction, more than twice the capacity it can handle today. When Stage 2 opens for revenue service in 2023, approximately 70% of the city's population will be within 5 kilometers of a clean, quiet, comfortable, and convenient light rail transit system.
We'll continue to use our communications and stakeholder relations program team. They, along with the planning staff at the city, have been critical to the success of Confederation Line to date, as well as for the support of nearly 30 open houses noted in this slide. This does not include meetings with property owners, individual condos or apartment buildings, or individual residents for information sessions. We've struck various working groups, and we've had numerous kitchen and coffee table meetings as well. The point I want to make here is consultations we've done to date have not always been easy, but they've been very much worthwhile, and we would not be where we are today without the input from the community this transit service will serve. We talk about the goal of making this a world-class system, and I can tell you the time residents of Ottawa, like yourselves this evening, both here or on the internet, have devoted to this project is also helping us to achieve this in spades. So please stay connected. You can subscribe to get information on our website at www.stage2lrt.ca, or you can email us at stage2@ottawa.ca. Moving forward, consultations will occur for any EA amendments, design refinements, some of the detours, etc., and we'll be back to councillors and residents many times on the road ahead. As I mentioned earlier, approval of this report does not assign the procurement. For that, staff will be back at the time of contract award sometime in Q2 2018, so spring, summer 2018. What approval does do, though, is set out a course that staff believes will deliver great results for Ottawa's transit future.
Alors, la Ville a tenu plus de 27 consultations publiques jusqu'à maintenant, et cela ne tient pas compte.
The town has held 27 public consultation to date, in addition to numerous stakeholders meetings. Public consultation and stakeholder meetings will be ongoing as we move forward with stage 2. The communication team and engagement with stakeholder is one of the best practice that we have learned about, and it will continue with phase 2. We encourage everyone to contact us on the stage 2 website, www.stage2lrt.ca. If you have other questions, you can contact that at stage2@ottawa.ca.
So that concludes our presentation. We can now move to the question and answer period, which none of us here today have ever done in this format, so we're looking forward to that. Okay, so we invite Karima back, yeah?
Oh, thank you. I'll move between questions from Facebook, the remote viewing location, and the audience here, so that everyone has a chance to participate. So now it's your turn to ask your questions. Afin que tout le monde puisse participer, je transmettrai à nos experts les questions recueillies sur Facebook, puis nous passerons à celles du public au centre communautaire Hunt Club Riverside Park, et puis à celles du public ici, présent, et ainsi de suite. So I'll be taking one question per. If time permits, after those who are waiting to ask questions have had their turn, we'll be happy to take more questions. Je surveillerai ma montre de.
I will be watching my watch closely so that we can answer as many questions as possible.
Early, city staff will continue to answer your questions live on Facebook until 8:30 p.m. Si nous finissons la séance tôt, le personnel répondra à vos questions en direct sur Facebook jusqu'à 20h30. Okay, so let's get to our first question. So we've got a question coming in from Facebook, and Kevin asks, are there any plans for 417 widening from Nicholas through the downtown core?
Well, with the Confederation Line project, we did widen from Nicholas East to the split, which allowed us to have the detours that we have today for the transit way. Further west of that, the province has no plans that I'm aware of through the downtown core for any additional widening. From Island Park, west of Island Park to Maitland, there is one phase of widening that is about to start construction this year, and then further west from Maitland to the 416, as I mentioned in the presentation, that widening will take place as part of our project and included in the bundling. So I guess the shorter answer was no, unfortunately, Kevin, but that's the state of the 417 in Ottawa.
Okay, great, thanks very much. We've got another question from Facebook where Vincent asks, are there any projections as to how many new transit users this will bring?
Yes. So overall, initially, we're expecting approximately a 10% increase. But if you refer to the slide that I showed earlier, so opening day at peak, we're looking at approximately 39,000 people getting on in that peak hour. Roughly, if you multiply that by 4, that gives you the ridership amount for any given day. And if you multiply that over a year, which is whatever, 250, the multiplier, that would, if I was doing the math on the fly, I could give you the overall answer. And then the increase over the period of time was about 13% on Confederation Line between 2023 and 2031, and about 14% on Trillium Line.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question from City Hall, we've got Marcel, who asks, why not go electric now on the Trillium Line?
So the answer to that question, quite simply, is the additional investment it would take to convert that system to electric. Our plans right now is to offer a very reliable system at 12-minute headways that will provide capacity from now until 2048 very comfortably and efficiently. It was very difficult for staff, and we did look at this to justify the additional expense that would be required to electrify that system, not just as it sits now, if we were to simply electrify it as it sits now without the additional double tracking that sometimes gets discussed, but if we were to add the full double tracking as well, the overall capital costs would be somewhere in the neighborhood of between $800 million and $1 billion to simply electrify and double track that system. And when you look at the ridership numbers, it becomes very difficult to justify that business case at this stage in the city's plans. Yes.
Okay, thanks very much. We have questions from the audience. Sorry, we'll just be a moment so you can have the microphone.
Yeah, we'll just get you the.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, my name is Jim. I have a fairly long question about the Trillium line. I have seen plans that show that line in the extension is a single track line with passing sidings. And tonight I learned that the cost is $500 million. So my questions are even more important. When the city took the Trillium line and doubled the number of trains on it, they expected to go from a service frequency of 15 minutes to about 8, and that didn't happen, right? So I'm concerned about this new line that goes much longer distance, that is single track, and you're going to be providing a service that has trains starting from Beauceville and stopping and starting very frequently to allow other trains to pass, unless there's only 2 trains on the line at a time, which is, again, poor service. So I'm kind of wondering about the service levels of this new development, whether it's been modeled and simulated to know that, in fact, you can run trains at a decent service, and what can we expect in terms of quality of the service on that line on a single track. At $500 million, I think we should be able to do better. And the second question is there anything as part of this project to improve the tracks between Carleton University, or even say South Keys and Bayview, which is single track and is built mostly in a rock cut, so I don't see a way that can be widened and double tracked. Do we have something that's really going to work here at $500 million?
So the short answer is yes, and why it's going to work is the price increase that you're seeing now in terms of our approach to the procurement really does take into consideration the points that you're raising. What we're trying to do is not only simply expand that line 11 kilometers further south, so 7 to Beauceville and another 4 kilometers to the airport, but what we're doing is expanding that line in a way that also looks at the needs on the existing system, and that includes adding additional passing tracks. Our plan now is to operate that system on the main line as a 2-train consist, which gives that added capacity that's going to meet the ridership demand from now until 2048. And our goal is to have the proponent.
What do you mean by 2-train?
So right now, what you see on the existing Trillium line are single trains that run back and forth, and they're almost at capacity right now. So we're going to put 2 trains, couple 2 trains together, and those 2 trains together will service the main line Monday to Friday. On the weekends, we don't need that kind of capacity, but during the week we do.
But there will be multiple train sets on the line, correct?
That's right, yes. There will be multiple.
So that they have
Sorry,
to pass.
could I invite you to use the microphone?
They have to pass frequently over a long distance and go onto sidings frequently.
They do. And so part of our plans and the reason for the increased cost is we are increasing the amount or the size of those passing tracks so they can pass each other more comfortably and eliminate some of those pinch points that have, in effect, caused us some issues in terms of trying to increase the capacity on the system. As well, we're doing upgrades to the existing Trillium line, both in some of the structures, but also the track itself, signals, as well as some of the drainage. So the increased price you're seeing on the capital side associated with that is providing an adequate budget, so when a proponent comes in to take over, they're not just improving the extensions, but they're improving the existing system, because what we want them is to take over the service availability. So that construction consortium will also be responsible for not just maintaining the trains at the new Walkley Yard. They'll be responsible and they'll be paid according to what's called providing service availability. So how those trains perform and the ability for those trains to perform well will affect the revenue stream they get. And that will drive a much more reliable system, we believe, as an end result when it comes to what we're going to achieve here with the procurement.
But just a short follow-up. The problem with a single track is that any variation along the pathway can throw the whole schedule out of the way. For example, if you're expecting to load trains in 1 minute and it takes a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, your planned passing points are in trouble, so everybody has to wait all down the line. Did you look at, in the project, have you looked at the cost of twinning that line instead of doing it single track? I mean,
so we have
saving money that's going to cost us. The other thing that I'm concerned about is the more times these trains are passing each other, the more opportunity there is for an error, an operator error, switching error, computer error, that is not so serious a problem on a two-track line. So the question is, why not two-track? And secondly, are you taking much more risk by doing it this way?
So the answer to that question is, for the first 6 months that our project team formed, all we did was look at how to ensure that Trillium line, in terms of the design team that was tasked with Trillium line, all they did was look at how you can operationally ensure that it's going to perform, and perform well and reliably, and that's what we did. So the extension of the passing tracks, the improvements to the signal system, that's all there. The question that you're asking about, would double tracking the entire way improve the reliability? The answer to that is it might, but it's not required, and the cost to do so, to double track, so we are doing some additional double tracking around Gladstone, for example, and other areas along the line, but the cost to do so is cost prohibitive to the project. We simply can't squeeze it in, and the other important input into that whole decision is the amount of people we're moving on that line as it compares to Confederation Line, for example. So there's about 1/10 of the ridership on that line. There are systems in North America, such as the River Line in New Jersey, for example, which moves twice as many people along that line at 15-minute headways, that is also signal tracked and functions quite well. We're very confident that our plan, which includes those enhancements on the main line, is going to produce very reliable 12-minute headways, and your point about modest delays that may happen at certain stations is a valid one, and what we've built into our operational plans is a bit of slack. So the way we've modeled it out is there's an ability for essentially trains to get caught up should they fall behind on schedule over the course of the next few minutes as it's working its way down the system. So all of your questions, they're great questions. They're all things that our team has worked through, and they're all things that our General Manager, John Manconi, who's here with us tonight, this was priority number 1 in terms of the task for the team in making sure that when we came back with a proposal to get this thing out into the market and procured effectively, were resolved as part of that process.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for your questions. There's a lot of questions coming in remotely. Before I go there, let's take another question from our audience.
Okay. My name is Bob Brocklebank. My question is, with respect to the Confederation line, which is going to become quite a long line eventually. Are any provisions being made for the potential future introduction of express services? Now here I'm thinking of reserving land for eventual sidings for passing of trains, or perhaps for 4 platform stations.
Could you maybe just repeat that, Bob? I'm sorry. You were mentioning Confederation Line?
Confederation Line,
Okay.
which will one day become very long. My question is, are you making any provisions at all for the eventual introduction of express service on the Confederation Line? To do so, you could reserve land at places for sidings, for trains to pass each other, or reserve land for the expansion of stations so that you could have 4 lines, 4 tracks passing through a station. It's commonly done on other rail lines. And you will have a very, very long rail line when you're finished, when it goes all the way to Canada.
I think we're going to let John Manconi answer that question.
Excellent question, and for those of you that want to relate to what he's talking about is express routes in busy places like New York City and so forth. Our headways are going to be so quick, they're in the 3 to 3.5 minute range, that we won't be building that express services. That's years and years away. We have some of the shortest headways in the industry and the busiest LRT with expandable vehicles that can take us out 30 years. So that's a discussion for about 50 years from now at best.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's take a question remotely, and then I'll come back to the audience, and we'll take more questions from our live audience as well. So I've got a question here from satellite location, and it's from Tara in South Keys. And she's asking, once the expansion of the Trillium is complete, how long will my trip be from Bayview to South Keys, time on the train, not headways?
So total trip time from Beausville to Bayview is about 22 minutes. You would probably drop between 7 and 8 minutes off of that. So you're looking at about a 14 to 15 minute ride.
Okay, thank you. I'll take one more remotely, and then I'll come back to my live audience. So this is from Ryan in Hunt Club, and he's asking, would it not make sense to convert the existing transitway from South Keys to Herdman to electric rail before spending the money to convert or adapt the existing diesel O-train to a busier corridor?
So that's a great question, and really a question that the team looking at the city's next transportation master plan, which will likely start around 2019, will engage in. All of the corridors will be reviewed as part of that plan, and an analysis will be done to see what gives the city the most value in terms of conversions, other conversions like Confederation Line was, of BRT to LRT, or extending existing LRT further into other reaches of the city.
Okay, merci. Alors ici, s'il vous plaît, your next question.
It's Pedro. Next year, Ontarians will go to the polls to pick existing state premier or leader. Let's say if it doesn't get back in office and new government forms, even with a Project 2, she allocated funds for that project, and government, that you start all over again, reapply, or what? What happens?
Well, at that point, we will have awarded contracts. We will have formal funding agreements with both levels of government. And I would hope that through the due diligence process that the city needs to go through in terms of producing a business case and demonstrating value for money, that any new government would see the merits of this project to not derail it, excuse the pun, at that late date in the process.
Merci. Nous avons une question de Facebook, et Steve de...
A question from Facebook. Steve asks this question: how do you see the transport of people who are living further than the station, for people from Navan that will have to go to the TRIM station? Have you thought of bus circuits?
The question's on the bus frequency from Evan, yeah.
Oui, on a le système de l'autobus qui
Yes, we have a bus that passengers will be taken at the park and ride at TRIM, and there's a lot of parking, and people can also use their bicycle or co-share transportation.
Vos questions,
Your questions?
please, from our audience.
Hello, my name's Ian, and I hate to belabor this point, but once again, it's a question about the Trillium line and double tracking. The last time, I believe the city spent some $60 million to get the time down from 15 minutes to that magical 8, which never happened, and we're stuck at 10 or 12, depending whose numbers you want to believe. So this time we're going to spend $500 million, and we're not going to see any difference in the time that it's going to take to travel, but supposedly we're going to get better reliability. I'm wondering if you could state exactly which sections of the existing O train will be double tracked, and when the province replaces the 417 bridge over the O train, is there any contemplation that that part of the rock cut will be cut out so that the double track can at least be extended south of the 417, and possibly the province might cut a deal with you as far as sharing in the construction costs of that? Thank you.
Sorry, were you referring to the bridge replacement over the O-train
Yes,
corridor on the
417
417?
bridge. Yes.
So, okay. So passing sidings between, going south from Bayview around where the new Gladstone station will be, and that does require some rock cut work, and is being some of that construction work. We've looked at opportunities of coordinating our shutdown with when they're planning on doing that bridge repair work, which needs to be done on a number of structures. Also additional double tracking around Carleton as well as Walkley on the existing line. As I mentioned in the presentation, the airport was originally going to share about 1 kilometer of track with the main line south of South Keys, but we're now double tracking an entire kilometer section in order to have that airport link run separately from the main line link at Beauceville. And in addition, there is some double tracking around a Leitrim station as well. I have maps available. We could sit down and I could show you exactly, but that's roughly where all of the additional double tracking will happen for passing tracks, as well as the expansion of all of the passing tracks today, including Brookfield is one I forgot to mention as well, because of the longer trains we're going to be running on that main line.
Thanks very much, and thank you again to our audiences for the great questions. So please do keep them coming. My next question is from our satellite location, et j'ai Christian qui est à Hunt Club qui demande.
Christian at Hunkle is asking what impact the construction of the Trillium line will have on the airport driveway.
There will be some minor construction impacts to Hunt Club. We have to put an additional train bridge over Hunt Club, which will be planned as it will be built and staged and then inserted in a sort of a rapid lift fashion as well. Our plans also call for an additional pedestrian bridge over Hunt Club to facilitate the ability for that pathway network to cross Hunt Club coming from the south north into South Keys, and the pathway network that goes around Sawmill Creek. So because of that, there will be some traffic impacts. We believe most of those traffic impacts can be limited to off-peak times for the most part, though.
Okay, thank you
Alors,
very much.
si je peux
Oui,
répéter en
allez-y.
français, justement, il y aura effectivement...
I'd like to repeat in French. There will be minor impact on Club. We have to put a bridge for the train. Bon, and we're going to use rapid lift as we did for the other bridges over the 417. We want also to install a pedestrian bridge to improve connectivity and to make sure that we reach all the tracks around. So the impact should be on non-peak hours.
Construction decisions like the one that's being asked will be up to the proponent, right? What we've done is we have anticipated and done our best to determine what we think is the most realistic way. The contractor is going to implement some of these structures, build the overall construction schedule. We've done proof of concept. This is what's led to us believing we can get into revenue services each of the dates that we've talked about, but the same principle applies. Ultimately, those decisions and the construction techniques will be made by the construction consortium that's hired.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chris and André. My next question is coming to us from Facebook, and Anna asks, why does the city want to rush through this process? What's the big urgency? We need more consultations, especially in the West End.
So the response to that, I would say, is around the procurement side. So we have an aggressive schedule, as I pointed out, in terms of getting each of those extensions into revenue service. That was the direction that staff got from council back in 2015. And in order to keep that schedule on track, we need to go out very soon with that request for qualifications. That's usually about a 12-week period, and what happens through that process is contractors, consortiums are screened in, and then there will either be 3 or 4 who are the top contenders who will then go on to compete through the in-market period and respond to our RFP. That process can take up to the better part of a year, so 8 to 10 months. And then in order to maintain our construction schedule and what we know of how long each of these extensions are going to take to build, that's why we need to get out with the RFQ now. Whatever delays happen now, the end result is going to materialize in terms of when we can actually open the line later, and things are tight and there's an order and we're trying to maintain that order.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions? Are there questions from our audience?
Hi, my name is June. I have a question about the airport link. You did mention this being a world-class system. So could I ask you to tell me the names of some other world capitals or major cities that require people to transfer 2 times between the airport and downtown?
Sure. Depending on your destination, Toronto, Washington. Yeah, but depending on your destination, right? So, and that's the thing about service, right? It depends on where you actually want to go. Many systems right now, you transfer from one line to another throughout New York. It's riddled with different transfers. So depending on where you even want to go, getting off at JFK could take you 2 or 3 transfers on that system. So it's not uncommon. I think there's been a lot of attention given to the 2 transfers. We've spent a lot of time looking at operations to ensure that that transfer is convenient and comfortable and as well timed as possible. For people going from the airport into the downtown, we're predicting that they're going to wait somewhere around 3 minutes, and they'll simply get off a train, walk across the platform, and get on the other train to go into downtown. And if you're coming from the other direction south, it's going to be less than a minute that transfer is going to take.
Okay, merci beaucoup. Our next question is coming from Martin in South Keys from our satellite location. Who's responsible for the overall integrated performance of the Confederation and Trillium line if they are developed separately?
Operation and performance?
Mm-hmm.
So Confederation Line is operated by OC Transpo. The maintenance, though, on Confederation Line, as I was discussing in the presentation, is going to be performed by RTG, who are currently the contractor that won the bid in 2012 to take on that maintenance work. And the benefits of the agreement that we've achieved with RTG is, even though someone else is going to build the civil work, so someone else is going to build the track, they're going to build the stations, RTG is going to supervise both the design of those stations and other project elements, as well as they'll supervise the build. And the reason why they're going to do this and provide this service is they are then going to be responsible for the warranty period of that build, and then after the warranty period is over, if anything goes wrong on the entire system, they're the ones who are going to fix it. So that single line of accountability and that risk profile that I was pointing to in the presentation is going to be maintained by RTG. Now, Trillium Line, whoever maintains Trillium Line will be the proponent that wins the bid that we're going to go through in the in-market period now. So, and that could be anyone. RTG has bowed out of the Confederation Line process because we believe they have a competitive advantage that others simply would not be interested in competing if RTG was in the bid. They think RTG has too many advantages, so that was one of the strategies in our discussions with RTG. They've agreed to step out of the bid. With Trillium Line, no one has an existing competitive advantage right now, and that could be any proponent. We've talked to probably about a dozen consortiums out there that are interested in bidding, and whoever wins that would be responsible for the maintenance of the line.
Okay, thank you. And we have another question coming in from Facebook where Kamal asks, what was the proposed expansion in the city property west of Albion Road? Sure. So we're going to invite Kamal to get back to us and to provide us with more information, more details. Okay, great. Thank you. And I'll take another question from Facebook, and then I'll turn back to our live audience. C'est une question de Nathalie.
Question for Nathalie. You said that the parking spots would go over 1,000 in Orleans. What do you base these estimates on? How do you know how many spaces will be required in this area? Do you think it will be enough? Thanks for the question. The estimate of the number of spaces is based on the current users and the estimate usage, and it's based on the estimates of our key teams, really. Okay, thank you.
Please.
Good evening. My name is Carl. I have a question regarding the MSF, which potentially will be built on the west end, just to the west of Moody, in one of the quadrants there. Seems to be the favorite location. I'd like to get more details on the environmental, the aesthetics, the logistics of storing and moving the rail stock, from that location, obviously supporting the west end extension.
So that's a great question. Thank you. We're really just initiating the process for the environmental assessment that is going to determine first what the best location is in fact for an MSF at Moody. And there is going to be 2 significant public consultations on that, where we're going to take people through, I believe right at this point there are sort of 8 quadrants that have potential, and there's an evaluation that's being done right now. So in the coming weeks, we'll be able to update, other residents like yourself who are interested in being part of the process and understand what we're trying to achieve through that process. The other issue, which I didn't, I sort of alluded to in the presentation, is, an MSF is achievable if we can fit it within our scope. We may not ultimately be able to also find a suitable location around Moody from an environmental perspective, in which case there is an EA process that will be going on concurrently further west into Canada, which staff of the city are also looking for, and that MSF may get pushed out further to the west as well as a result of that. So there's a couple projects that are going on to determine what the best location is for the city overall. Both those teams are well integrated and coordinated in terms of understanding what the other's doing. At this point, though, I can't tell you, because we simply haven't done the analysis, what is the most likely location for that MSF. I can tell you roughly that we're looking at it ultimately holding somewhere in the neighborhood of 44, 45 trains altogether, so it will be smaller than what we're going to see down in Belfast when that site is expanded. Okay.
Merci. We've got lots of questions coming in from satellite. So I'd like to take one from David in Hunt Club. He asks, with a projected 16-month shutdown of the O train involving the tracks north of Greenboro, what are the structural problems? We've previously paid for siding work, bridge repair, tunnel repair, and so on, with the shutdowns over the past few years.
So some of those things, I'm not sure where the information's coming from. So some of the things are directly related. The rehabilitation works are directly related to some of the things that are mentioned in the question. So we do want to do some work to improve the tunnel right now, and there's right now currently the owner's engineer team is scoping out that work, and whoever wins the bid will be doing work to rehabilitate the tunnel and get that up to a good state of repair. As well, there's the bridge crossing of the Rideau River into Carleton University. The city has that project. That project's been on the books since 2012. We didn't want to shut down the line an additional time in order to do that work in the last couple of years, so we've actually held back, and we're going to do that work as part of the process. There's also some structures work around Sawmill Creek near the Brookfield passing siding that we're taking a look at right now. One of the other structures that we're trying to determine if we could include into our scope would actually be a new bridge at what we call the Elwood Diamond. So this is the area where the VIA trains cross the O train system in and around. It's just a little bit north of Heron Road where we have the Confederation Heights station. So one of the things we're doing right now, and gratefully we got some money from the federal government to do this, is a design for a new bridge. This is one of those elements that would greatly improve the reliability of the line, as well as some of the maintenance. That crossing is actually a little hard on the trains, so that will help on both of those fronts. So all told, I guess when we're talking about that 16-month shutdown as compared to what was previously envisioned, which were a number of consecutive summer shutdowns, the reason for the 16-month shutdown and why we're recommending it is, first, there's simply a lot more scope to this project than we had originally envisioned, and more scope means more time. I sort of, in the office, we talk about 16 months and some of the comments that we're getting about that being a long period of time, and meanwhile I see homes being built in my neighborhood that take longer than 16 months, and when I look at the overall scope of this project, it's quite large. And the other thing too that presents a risk and would actually add costs to the city in terms of the overall procurement is, if we were going to shut down and then restart, a proponent is going to look at that and they're going to price all of the risks involved in ensuring that that first phase of work is done exactly on time, doing all of the commissioning they need to do to get that system up and running again for another 8-month period, only to shut it down and then do all the rest of the work and then do the same thing again in terms of testing and commissioning all the existing systems, get it going again. And because of the additional scope, we wouldn't be talking about 1 or 2 consecutive summer shutdowns, we'd be talking about 3 or 4. So again, the ability to get into revenue service by 2021 would be unachievable, and we'd be looking more realistically at something closer to 2022 or 2023 if we were to stagger it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Chris. Going back to your previous question, could you clarify for us what MSF stands for?
Yes, and I apologize. We speak much too often in acronyms at the city. It's a maintenance and storage facility. So there's one for Confederation Line, which is It looks rather lovely right now, and we have trains being assembled there and coming off the line at Belfast. And we have an existing one for Trillium Line, which was on the map earlier in the presentation at Albion Road, where Albion essentially dead ends north and south at a freight yard.
Okay, thank you. I've got a quick question from the satellite location from Tara, and she's asking, how long will it take to go from one end to the other of the Confederation line?
I'm going to have to write back to Tara. I haven't modeled out the last extension to Moody, as well as the timing from Trim recently, and I don't have it off the top of my head,
okay.
now that the going from one end to the other has changed.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, keep those tough questions coming. We appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. So now to back to our live audience. Your questions, vos questions, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. My name's Ian. Good evening. My question is with respect to the EA amendment for Bayshore Station to Moody. Can you clarify what components of that section from the station right to the MSF are encompassed in the EA amendment, and expand somewhat for us what that process will look like with respect to public submissions or public consultations?
Sure. So the scope of that, we'll look at, so it's an EA that'll be updated from a technology perspective. So there's an existing bus rapid transit EA that's approved for that corridor, and that's what they're constructing right now, is an extension of the transitway from Bayshore to Moody. Our EA is going to look at converting the technology from bus rapid transit to LRT. In terms of scope, it's going to look at grade separating at Holly Acres. Right now, it was determined that we didn't need to grade separate for the volume of buses going through there. We, as a policy at the city, grade separate throughout Confederation Line, and we'll do so as part of this project. So the scope will include a bridge at Holly Acres, the conversion of the alignment, and then with respect to both the MSF and the station, it will look at the footprint, it will look at the natural and environment around the station in terms of environmental sensitivities, in terms of any species at risk. It will look at, it will do geomorphological studies, it will look at drainage, all of the things that are typical for that kind of scope of work. In terms of opportunities for public input, there will be 2 public open houses that will be widely advertised. As I mentioned before, the first one, which is sort of the kickoff, is going to happen within the next few weeks, and then there will be a follow-up likely around, I believe, June, which would be the second one, where we'll actually be coming back to the public with things like, you know, we had another question about where the MSF is going to be. It will likely include a recommended location for the MSF, and as well as updated information with respect to not just the size of the station, but the amount of transfers we're expecting there, how we're going to lay out those bus operations, so laybys for buses, how they're going to move in terms of the site plan of the overall station, as well as how things are going to function at the other end at Bayshore in terms of the reduced transfers that are no longer going to happen at Bayshore. Due to the fact that most of the transfers for people coming in from both Stittsville and Canada will take place at Moody. Bayshore will service probably about 1/3 of the total transfers in the West End, but they'll be limited to the local service, as well as those people coming in from Bell's Corners, as well as west of Baseline, the Queensway Carleton Hospital area. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. If you recall, Kamal on Facebook had asked what was the proposed expansion in the city property west of Albion Road, and we asked for clarification. So he's come back to us and he's asking, what is the rationale for moving the Walkley MSF to west of Albion? Okay, great.
So the rationale for that is really twofold. One is simply cost. We compared the cost between doing a complete rehabilitation of the existing site that is on the east side of Albion Road. So rehabilitation of the facilities, the building of new facilities, which you would need to do to house the additional vehicles. We also looked at some of the environmental remediation we would need to do at the site, as well as the purchase of the site itself. Currently, that site is not owned by the city leases that land. And we did a cost comparison to what it would cost to build essentially the same site on property the city already holds on the other side of Albion Road. So taken together, it's about $4 to $5 million cheaper to build a brand new facility on the other side of the street, as opposed to doing all of the rehabilitation works that I've mentioned, as well as purchasing the land on the west side of Albion Road. Further to that, when a proponent is coming in to take on responsibility for the condition and being able to provide good service availability for a new fleet, as well as some of the existing trains, they are going to want to build a site to suit. It will be easier for them to build that site to suit at a brand new location than it would be for them to reconfigure an existing site. The other advantage that we looked at as well is we can actually start building on that new site before we have to do anything operationally to shut down what's happening currently with the existing line. So we can actually get in there, start doing that work in 2019 before we need to shut it down in 2020 in order to then do the rest of the work for the whole extension. I should mention that we've had a number of questions of Trillium Line. So we talk about 16 months. That 16 months will be scheduled, and it will be scheduled from when classes end at Carleton in 2020, in May of 2020, and then it will be rescheduled to reopen when classes go back in session in 2021 in September.
Okay, merci beaucoup. A question from our live audience now.
My name's Bill, and I'd just like to thank you very much for the city looking at the extension from Bayshore to Moody. I think it's a great decision. Will you be looking at stopping the work on the West Transitway bus project right now? I think there's a real opportunity for some savings there. And secondly, you mentioned the buses that were going to terminate at Bayshore for the transfers, which I think I just heard you say will now be connecting at Moody. Will you also look at the baseline transitway bus extension, which I think was going to terminus at Bayshore, and move that out to Moody as well?
So I'm just going to try and make sure I get all your questions. Maybe I'll kind of do it in the reverse order. So the line won't terminate at Bayshore. It will extend to Moody, as we've talked about. Now I got to go back and remember the rest of your questions. Can you just remind me?
Sure. I was just looking at the possible cost savings of the current project that's underway with the bus station that you're building. Now you're going to build a train station. Why not save some money?
So this has been top of mind when we started discussing Moody. So we have been coordinating with the team from our infrastructure services department that are currently responsible for that line. You know, there were a lot of, if you've been following the project, it's actually been a little bit de-scoped initially because, one, we didn't think we needed the grade separator at Hollyacre, but also the goal was to eventually convert to LRT. So there are ongoing discussions right now in terms of what we can do to minimize the throwaway costs, which we don't think are very costly at this point, according to our analysis. You know, but we're doing that because we want to make sure that if we're going to open it for the likely about 2.5 years before we'll have to close it again for the conversion, we can justify that the additional money we're spending to date is going to be worthwhile. So it's unlikely that we will stop construction, but what we are doing is making sure that we're not doing anything that will be either ripped up or thrown away as a consequence of our project. Staff still believe there are benefits to having that operate for almost 3 years before we have to shut it down, and right now that's our current course of action.
Okay, Thanks very much. My next question is coming to us from Facebook, and we have Brent who is asking, how will the commute from the West End be mitigated when Stage 2 converts the existing BRT transitway?
So I'm going to make a couple of assumptions. I'm going to assume that Brett is coming from somewhere way out in Canada.
Let's assume.
Okay, and I can go through baseline too if Brett wants to write back. So from Canada, we were just talking about that extension from Bayshore to Moody, which will be operational later this year. I think at the end of 2017. When we have to close that down, we will revert back to using sections of the 417 to run buses, and it will be similar to what is there today, although some of the ramps are being reconfigured as part of the, both to facilitate our detours as well as part of the highway widening project between Maitland and the 416. When we shut down the BRT that runs on the north side of the 417 between Pinecrest and Bayshore, we will also use the 417 to detour buses along that corridor while that's shut down. As you get further west and then start to head north, as I was mentioning, we did the alignment shift at Lincoln Fields. That was done deliberately. Not just because we wanted to keep the train out of water, but the advantages from an operational perspective during construction were also extremely beneficial to the overall project, with that transitway remaining open the entire time. So if you're coming in from the west, you'll be detoured onto the 417, you will come off the 417 and you will get on the existing transitway underneath the Queensway at the Pinecrest Creek corridor. You will follow that as it currently runs today. There will be some temporary lanes put in place where we're constructing along the Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway in and around our future Dominion station, but we will keep the same operating levels that we have today. And then around 2021, probably midpoint in that year, when we close the transitway trench between Dominion and Tunney's, we are going to do some essentially temporary road modifications that would see buses come off the Sir John A. Macdonald, and we'd build a temporary transitway between Dominion Station itself and Scott Street. And then this is at Scott Street at Churchill, and then further east from Churchill, we would remain on Scott Street until we got into Tunney's pasture.
Okay,
so that's the one route. And if we could do baseline, it's very similar.
If we hear back, we'll check in again. One more question from Facebook before I take more questions from our live audience and getting back to satellite. Matthew is asking, what are the plans for when a train breaks down mid-route?
When there's a disruption in service, we will immediately initiate what's called bus bridging service. So this parallel buses will be deployed to help passengers, and special signs will be already predetermined locations set out, and predetermined routes will occur. There's also at key locations there's the ability to run reduced rail service and go to single track. So it's a combination of both, and it depends what the occurrence is, where it occurs on the system, and how that works in terms of rollout for where that incident is located.
Great, thanks very much. Lots of great questions coming in. A question from our live audience, please. We're good? Okay. I've got a question here. It's from our satellite location. It's from Vivian, who's asking, where will the public washrooms be installed on the Trillium line, at which stations?
On Trillium line, there are washrooms currently being installed at Bayview Station, and then at the terminus station at Beausville, we'll also have a public washroom.
Okay, I've got quite a few questions that are coming through. Let me see. Are there any other questions from our audience here? In the meantime, while I scan through.
My name is Javon Nicholas. I apologize for coming in late, and so you may have already addressed my question, but just about the what I've read in the paper about going east to Orleans and the 174 and the question of lanes. Is there any consideration, once you have the extra lane essentially freed up, that you would reserve it for high occupancy vehicles?
So there is a recommendation in the report, and it's for a limited section, albeit, but between Jeanne d'Arc and Montreal Road, we think there would be some cost efficiencies from a construction coordination perspective to implement what is the ultimate plan for the 174, which is 2 lanes of single or normal vehicle occupancy in each direction, as well as that HOV lane that you mentioned. The configuration in terms of overall width of the roadway would be much larger than what you see today, because those outside lanes are being driven by professional drivers from OC Transpo, so they don't require us to have what we'd otherwise have as a recommended shoulder. So part of this is actually going, if we are able to secure funding from the province to do this, it will see, you know, a proper shoulder in the inside lane, 2 lanes of regular traffic that you see that are standard. There'd be what's called a buffer. If you're traveling out in the 417 west of Moody, you'll see that there's a buffer before that HOV lane. It's a similar treatment here, and then a shoulder. So the answer is yes, but in a limited fashion. It's not as simple as removing the buses and having the cars occupy that asphalt.
Thank you. J'ai une question maintenant de Facebook. J'ai Steve qui demande.
Steve is asking on Facebook, how do you see the transportation of people who are living further from the stations, for people from Navan to go to the trim station? Have you already planned some bus roads? It's a very good question. The bus network will be comparable to the network that's been that's already the bus route that are already implemented. So you're going to be able to go wherever you want that way.
Do the LRT projections on ridership take into consideration potential fare increases?
So all of our ridership modeling has been built on the assumption that fare increases will go at 2.5% annual increases.
2.5%?
That's right.
Okay, annual increases. Okay, thank you. Any questions from our audience? Okay, now I'll move on to my next question from Facebook, and I've got here, it's Simon who's asking, should the LRT get shut down for any reason, what routes are available to get riders to downtown from the west end? So for example, Lincoln Fields to Dominion, once the bus lanes are taken out from Bayshore to downtown.
So that's similar to the earlier question. That's the bus bridging service that we'll have. So you'll have as close to parallel service as we can provide. There'll be signage that'll direct you to where you catch the buses. And then people typically do their own choices depending on where they're going. They may choose to walk for the rest of the trip. They may use a cab or Uber or whatever the case may be. But we will deploy buses immediately if there's a shutdown, and go to a reduced service if we're able to with the rail service, because we do have what are called crossover tracks.
Merci. A question from the satellite location, and this is from Brian. Where will the transfer points be for people traveling to Gatineau?
So the main transfer point for, well, there are a couple of transfer points for people traveling to Gatineau, depending on if you're on STO buses or OC Transpo buses. So the main OC Transpo corridor into Gatineau, and John, correct me, do you want to take it on? Okay.
The main transfer point from Gatineau into Ottawa will be at Lyon Station. Is that size to handle a lot of transfers. There will also be some continuous service of Gatineau buses on a limited basis all the way over to Ottawa University and looping back. But the main transfer point for STO buses coming into Ottawa will probably be at Lyon. And then there's also some limited services going back the other way for bus.
Okay, merci beaucoup, thank you. Questions coming in from Facebook. So Mike is asking, is there any plan to combine or to link Confederation Station and Heron Station?
So currently, no. I do know that the federal government is in the process of doing a master plan for that whole area around Confederation Heights, and as a result of that plan, a proposal could be brought forward that might look at integrating that BRT to LRT nexus, but that's a plan that is fairly forward-looking. We're talking, 10 or 20 years out.
Okay, great, thank you. My next question is from Satellite Location, and this is from Vivian in Emerald Woods, and she's asking, the widening of the Highway 174 and 417 is being bundled into the east-west DBF, so why was the widening of the Airport Parkway not included in the DBFM for the Trillium Line extension?
So the simple answer to that is there isn't enough potential for construction coordination conflict to warrant that kind of bundling. Both of these projects, both the extension to the airport as well as the extension to Beauceville, can take place quite easily without any kind of construction conflict. So there wasn't the same drivers from both a schedule and a construction coordination perspective as there are for things like the 174 and the 417, where that kind of coordination is paramount to the success of the project.
Yeah, her concerns were that both are needed as soon as possible to service this fast-growing South End communities.
Yes, that's true. The schedule for the airport widening is on a separate track that isn't associated with the LRT schedule.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to keep checking in if there's anyone from our live audience. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. We have a few more minutes before we start to wrap things up. Next question is from the Satellite Location, and this is from Kathy in Hunt Club Park. She says, I understand that by 2023, transit ridership will increase by 10% with a direct 8% resulting from Stage 2 LRT improvements. How does this figure compare to other cities that have made major investments in their transit infrastructure? Is this a good value for our tax dollars?
So I could answer that question more generally. I don't have other details about specific ridership growth witnessed in the same timeframes as we are projecting some of the ridership growth that we've gone through as a comparator to other jurisdictions. But what I can respond to is when our business case was looked at in comparison to the business cases of other projects that are currently planned or have recently been implemented, it is, as we mentioned in the presentation, one of the strongest business cases across the country. So it compares favorably, more than favorably, quite strongly, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. Rocky from Facebook is asking, what is the proposal for Leitrim Road?
So the proposal for Leitrim Road with respect to our project is we're planning on shifting the alignment slightly to the north. So Leitrim Road would switch slightly to the north at the point where we need to build a bridge for the roadway to cross over the Trillium Line corridor. The reason for this is what we're trying to do is minimize private property impacts on the south of Leitrim Road. So there were I believe it was about 6 to 8 private properties that were fairly significantly impacted by the construction of a bridge at that location. So we've worked with the NCC and we found an alternative that would see it slightly shift to the north to avoid those property conflicts. Also, as part of our contract, part of our project, we're looking at improving the intersection of Leitrim and Albion Road to provide better traffic flows through that area, both for construction itself, but also in order to get good bus service in order to help drive some of that ridership while we're constructing the line itself.
Okay, thank you. So we're just starting to wrap things up here. There was a question earlier that Nick had asked, how long will a trip from Orleans to downtown take once the Confederation line is complete to Orleans? And we have a response of 25 minutes. That's about right. It's about right? Okay. And also, from a previous question from Tara, we had from Moody to Trim, it's about 50 minutes. So that's some additional information there.
I think that's one of my staff impersonating people.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So we had a couple of questions previously from Bernie in River Ward. Will there be a Trillium Line Bridge grade separation at the busy VR Rail, West Diamond, and almost abandoned Walkley Diamond Greenboro Station?
So I believe he's referring to the Elwood Diamond, and that's one of the things we're looking at, grade separation, and we're doing the bridge design currently.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. And I think these are sort of my last questions here. For Martin and South Keys, have the conflicts with the AZRs in the area of Leitrim Road been discussed with Transport Canada?
There have been discussions with Transport Canada about that. We've had also more focused discussions with the Airport Authority, who are ultimately the ones that govern those zoning regulations. And at this point, we don't foresee any problems associated with us moving forward with our plans for Trillium Line in relation to their future expansion of the airport line, okay, or the airport runways.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Please, can I add a question from our audience? Okay, great.
Thank you again for all of this. It's been very informative. My name's Evan, and the only question we were actually just thinking about, you mentioned that you got a response back that Trim to Moody would be 50 minutes. I know that was probably like a ballpark number. Do you think that's close to the reality, or like what's the time period right now is what we're trying to figure out versus what it's going to be?
If I was guessing, and I'd probably say just a little bit less, you're probably looking at about 45 minutes. But I'd have to go through and model it out. And that's, you know, what you're pointing to. This is really information that we should also be just providing as a matter of course. So we'll go back and make some of these time estimates available to the public as we move forward as well. But it's quite a long distance, so it takes a while. There's lots of, when I said 41 stations, you know, most of those are on Confederation Line, and that's a lot of stops, 30 stops. Sorry.
The only add I wanted to think about with that is, with that transportation time that you're taking, obviously the intention is to increase ridership, so those vehicles got to go somewhere. So how much of that, and I'm going to use a very simple example, is TD Place, trying to park there. So I'm looking at the same example of when you want to be able to go someplace. Is that going to, are we looking at double-decker parking or just huge, large parking spots? Like, what's that going to look like?
Sorry, just what?
Like, if I'm going to a park and ride, like if for those stations, what is the parking situation going to look like at those areas?
So at Trim, we're going to expand the parking availability there by 1,100 spaces opening day. So that will help those people in the East End. You know, as I mentioned in the presentation, park and ride demand is, it's great in the city, and we're doing our best to expand that. And that, you know, there's a department, the Transportation Planning Department is always working at identifying those opportunities to expand park and ride. Our project, though, in the south really does create quite a lot of additional park and ride capacity, which will be, I think, appealing to a lot of residents in Riverside South and even further south, places like Manotick, etc. At Beausville, as I mentioned, the ultimate capacity there will be 3,100 spots, and at Leitrim we're also expanding. Ultimately, there'll be 925 spots there, which will help. That's also another growing community in and around Albion, so it should help. Okay.
Great, thank you. We have another question from our live audience.
You mentioned earlier about the above-grade separation at Holly Acres. What can nearby residents expect in terms of noise and vibration?
So the entire system gets modeled, and we do noise and vibration testing to ensure that the operation of the train isn't going to be felt in adjacent residences. And along Confederation Line, I think there are 19 properties that are within 4 meters of the alignment. So in this particular situation, most of the current residences are quite a ways away from that. So in terms of what it will look like a bridge that's about as high as the Queensway. And I'm imagining you've been following the file, it will also contain noise attenuation, which has been promised to the residents for quite some time, and they've been waiting either for that project that's now being bundled on the 416 to provide that noise attenuation in the interim, and then when we build, that noise attenuation will be on the other side, providing a buffer between the LRT and the community to the north. Does that answer your question? Yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
So vibration, there are basic standards that the proponent needs to meet in terms of how they actually build the track and the interface between the train running on that track and the distribution of vibrations there. And we do modeling to ensure, and then when they actually operate, we go out and measure to make sure that those vibrations aren't being felt at adjacent in areas where it would could be felt in adjacent properties. And at this particular location, our team does not at this point have any worries, given the fact that we've had to, apply other mitigation measures in areas where we're much closer, like within that sort of 4 to 10 meter range, depending on whether the train's curving at that point or adjusting vertically. At this point, there isn't, the only vertical adjustment is the bridge itself, which is also still fairly far away from nearby residences.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. Is there another question?
It's on. I just want to ask for a clarification from Lincoln Fields through Connaught Park. Can you tell me about the alignment? Is it going to be, originally I thought it was going to be running along the same line, but you mentioned water. Is it going to be east or west of the actual facility?
Sure.
And also the height?
Yeah, I can take you. So this just gives you an idea, sort of the launching point, I think, more than anything else. So there's Lincoln Field. So you'll see that at the corner, which is the south corner of the slide, you see where the blue alignment meets up with the red alignment there. So at Lincoln Field Station, and then as it crosses Carling, it will be under Carling Road, and then it will emerge from a trench. And by the time it hits Woodruff High School Yard, where they have the oval, that's about where you get at grade. And there's sort of a natural embankment there. From there, the track will split. And essentially, at this point, you have 4 tracks. So 2 tracks provide north-south connection to Baseline Station further to the south. And that follows that alignment pretty much on the east side of the existing transitway, right to Baseline. In your case with Connaught, what we do is we start to curve in a southwest direction, and we also start to rise. So at its maximum point, we're about 5 meters higher than where the existing transitway is. And what that does is it enables us to cross one of the train tracks that's continuing on south to Baseline. So once we get over that, we immediately start to descend. But at the same time, then we need to cross the Pinecrest Creek itself, and then if you live in the neighborhood, you'll be familiar with the pathway system that's just on the west side of the creek. So at the point that we cross that path, we're about 3 meters high, and then we continue to descend directly. So what happens is you hit the park at grade, and then we're going into a trench for about 85 to 100 meters until it's fully buried, and then it passes underneath the rest of the park. The 3 homes the city already owns and which will be demolished as part of the project. And then it doesn't emerge until you're on the other side, well on the other side of Connaught, at the north side parallel with the Queensway where OC Transpo's bus garage is. So in total, I think it's about 300 meters that were fully buried in that area. And everything else is simply getting to that point where we're fully buried, so people can cross freely, including the traffic as well as the area through that yard. I have other slides. There are slides available on the Stage 2 website that take you through all of those distances in more detail, but hopefully that gives you a general picture.
These are great questions. I've got the last 2 questions coming in from our Hunt Club Park satellite location. And this question is from Paul, and he's asking, with respect to ridership, once Phase 2 is completed and Highway 417, 174 is widened east to Orleans and Kanata in the west, has the ridership been re-examined?
So the ridership projections anticipated the 417 widening in their modeling. That project has been long on the books and was included in the overall modeling that we've done. We have recently been asked to model what potential ridership impacts there are on the 174, and tasks and staff right now are looking at that and are going to be able to provide an analysis to council or before March 8th with a more detailed analysis of what that might look like.
Okay, great. And here's our last big question, and it's coming from Martin, and he's asking, what can be told about the system's capacity to absorb increased passenger numbers once the airport and EY Center are being served, and when the South End residents go to Sens games at Le Breton Flats?
What I can say is we have tons of capacity on Trillium Line, on both the main line as well as the line to the airport, with the existing plans for the system that are going to be more than adequate to service all of those riders coming down from the south end that want to get on LRT, and we're encouraging them to do that, to enjoy a game on Le Breton Flats. It's going to be an excellent way to travel to any kind of event, and vice versa. We're hoping that more people are going to choose LRT when there are large events like Comic-Con at Ernst & Young as well. So it's not just the airport, that's other things as well that we're hoping people are going to choose transit for.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much. I'd like to thank everyone for their questions. Merci beaucoup pour toutes vos questions. J'aimerais surtout remercier nos panélistes. Thanks to Chris and André d'avoir partagé vos connaissances, and all of those who also added and contributed to our important discussion today. So please note that after the information session, there'll be a video of the event, and it's going to be available to view on the city's Facebook page and on the YouTube channel. Une fois la séance d'information terminée, les résidents pourront regarder la vidéo de l'événement sur la page Facebook ou sur la chaîne YouTube de la ville. So if you'd like to keep up to date on the project as it moves forward, then please visit the Stage 2 website. It's stage2lrt.ca. stage2lrt.ca. Si vous souhaitez vous tenir au courant du projet au fur et à mesure qu'il progresse, consultez le site web de l'étape 2 à étape2tlr.ca. Et je répète, étape2tlr.ca. Also, if you still have questions, you're always welcome to email your inquiries to stage2@ottawa.ca. Again, it's stage2@ottawa.ca. Et si vous avez d'autres questions, n'hésitez pas à les poser par courriel à étape2@ottawa.ca. Et je répète, étape2@ottawa.ca. Nos panélistes se tiennent maintenant à la disposition des médias. The team members of our panel will now be available to speak with members of the media. I'd like to thank everyone very much. Merci beaucoup et je vous souhaite une très bonne soirée. Merci. Thank you.